state affiliates here in San Diego. It was my pleasure to come to the national conference. We're here today in a climate of fear and of division, of bigotry and of hate that this president has fostered. This morning, the president said that we should reject bigotry and hate and white supremacy. If we did that, we would reject him. That's why Americans need a new president in 2020. The vision that I have for the United States is of a country where people appreciate each other's differences. They have a basic respect for one another. They understand that our diversity is our strength, and also understand that communities like the Latino community have been contributing to the forward progress of this country for generations. And that immigrants, whether the color of their skin is brown or any other color, have made a positive difference to our country since its beginning. I'm glad to take questions.
Mr. Secretary, while you were giving your speech, Senator McConnell put out a statement and he said that Senate Republicans are prepared to do our part. Does this give you any confidence that Congress will do something?
Actions speak louder than words, especially when it comes to somebody like Mitch McConnell. Some of these politicians say what they have to say in the moment, hoping that the emotion will subside, that the political upheaval will blow over, and then they slow walk any kind of change. I don't believe that Mitch McConnell has the best interests of the American people at heart, including when it comes to common sense gun safety legislation. I hope that the Democrats in Congress will continue to push to try and ensure that we get gun safety legislation. And if Mitch McConnell wants to see the light, then more power to him. I'm not holding my breath.
Do you have any specific plans or statements on how you would police the internet to prevent mass shootings? As you know, there have been multiple mass shootings this year that have been inspired by message boards, hateful message boards on the internet.
Yeah. I would like to see our federal government work more closely with each of the social media platforms, as well as companies that are a platform that host various sites on the internet, to better be able to detect individuals who represent a threat to themselves or to other people, and who begin to go down a path of radicalization, including radicalization toward toxic and dangerous white supremacy, which we clearly see a pattern of in this country. And we know what some of these sites are. Of course, we always have to be respectful of freedom of speech. We are in the United States and we respect the First Amendment. But within those bounds, my hope is that the Department of Justice will find a way to work more closely and effectively with our technology platforms to root that out. I think most Americans support that.
Mr. Castro, can you win the presidential nomination and even the presidency without a major Hispanic turnout specifically for you? And also, why did you wait till yesterday to confirm for this conference?
Yeah, I believe that no matter who you are in this campaign, both in the primary and in the general election, that you're going to need a lot of Latino support. And I'm not taking the Latino community for granted. Just because I'm Latino doesn't mean that I'm going to necessarily get the support of a majority of Latinos out there. So I'm working hard for the support of the Latino community like I am for every other community in our country. That's part of the reason that I wanted to come here today. We had a scheduling opportunity that allowed me to be here. I'm glad that I was able to get here, and especially at this moment when a lot of Latinos, whether they're recent immigrants or they're people who have been here for generations, feel like this president has put a target on their back.
Why didn't you prioritize this meeting as opposed to this other possibility? You could have confirmed this weeks ago and been part of the publicity generated about the candidates coming to speak here. You weren't mentioned for many weeks.
Well, it's happened before.
Okay.
Sometimes the schedule provides an opportunity. This isn't the first time that we've confirmed something a day or a few hours before we actually do it, trust me.
Okay.
So,
Secretary Castro?
Yeah.
We've seen a lot of other candidates in this race who maybe have not been prioritizing the Latino vote. I'm curious your opinions on that. I know there was an article that came out a while back saying that some of these candidates' websites either didn't have Spanish or had incorrect Spanish, things like that. Do you see that other candidates in this race are as committed to the Latino vote and getting that out, and what's your take on that?
Well, I hope everybody will be, you know, and I see this as a positive, that we've seen an kind of evolution of what political campaigns are doing to reach out to the Latino community. Certainly, Spanish language translation, doing interviews with the Spanish language networks, reaching out to groups like UnidosUS and LULAC and others are part of that. Putting the resources into campaigning in Latino communities across the United States, especially in those early states. I think of people who have made, including myself, made visits to places like Storm Lake, Iowa, which has a significant Latino population. I'm going to keep doing it. All I can say is for my campaign, I'm not taking the Latino vote for granted. I mean, every 4 years, we talk about the sleeping giant of the Latino community. Well, if we're ever going to wake up and see the full potential at the ballot box of the Latino community, it means that all of us are going to have to do our part. That includes candidates, it includes the nonprofit organizations that are out there that register people to vote and help turn out people, and of course it includes the DNC, the DCCC, the DSCC, DLCC, and also we know that on the Republican side, they're also doing what they believe is strategic. So as Democrats, we can't take that for granted. I mean, look at a good example of that is Florida and the Venezuelan community. Republicans are reaching out to the Venezuelan American community in South Florida. Now, this is a president that has not extended temporary protected status, TPS, to Venezuelans who are here, who has said a lot of words about Venezuela, but has not really helped out Venezuelans who are here in the United States. And Democrats have. We have a story to tell, but we need to make sure that we don't take that for granted and that we actually invest our resources in those communities.
Secretary Castro, how do you come to the conclusion that you can take Texas? Because that's the end of the game. I mean, if you can take Texas, but we've never seen that from a Democrat, at least for quite some time.
Yeah, so there are two dynamics happening in Texas that mean that it's going to be very competitive in 2020. One dynamic is the one that we always hear about, which is the demographic change that has happened. In Texas, the Latino community turned out in 2018 at a much greater rate than it did in 2014, the last midterm. The second dynamic is that the suburbs of America are abandoning Donald Trump and the Republicans. You have more evidence of this with retirements, 4 retirements of Republican congressional representatives over the last 2 weeks. As you know, that's an early warning sign about the likelihood of losing seats in the next election. You have Texas 23, I believe Texas 24, Texas 2, and then another one. You know, the writing's on the wall that Texas is changing. And I'm confident that if I'm the nominee, that you will see Latino turnout like you have never seen in the history of this country. Right now, you have Latino turnout that is fully 18 or 19 points underneath non-Hispanic whites and African Americans. I believe that if I'm the nominee, that goes up by at least 10 points or more, and changes Texas, changes Arizona, changes Florida, changes a number of other states, including Nevada, seals Colorado, and also with Virginia. So that's part of the reason I believe that. I also believe that I can compete in those suburbs, among the college-educated crowd that has been very turned off by the bigotry and the division of Donald Trump. And in a general election, I feel very confident about my chances in Texas and these other states.
Secretario, ¿cuál sería su mensaje después de la tragedia del pasado fin de semana para la población hispana en especial?
A la comunidad latina, quiero decir que estoy contigo y vamos a proteger la comunidad y hacer lo que es necesario para que su familia pueda tener éxito en los Estados Unidos. My message to the Latino community is that I am with you, that we will do what we have to protect you and your family in this country, and to see to it that you can reach your dreams and have success in the United States.
Think about President Trump's comments today about the shooting.
They sound like empty words that are too late. You watch him reading that statement, empty of any emotion, no real feeling in it. It seems like somebody put him up to reading that statement instead of that he really wanted to go out there and read it. And I'll tell you this, I would not be surprised if the word that's strategically leaked out of the White House over the next couple of days is that the president begrudgingly did that and regrets it. Because what he does is that he says the words that some of his advisors thinks he has to say to maintain a modicum of political viability with people who are very concerned about where he's at on these issues. And then he goes back to signaling to his base that, hey, I didn't really mean that. I just said that because I had to say that. It's the same game every time. It's the same steps every time. And so I wouldn't be surprised if we see that in a couple of days of leaks about him walking that back.
What are your thoughts around monitoring those owners of registered owners of automatic weapons and their activity on social media? What are the challenges on doing something like that?
Well, I don't believe that these weapons should be in the hands of people in the first place. I support a renewed assault weapons ban. And so I would rather see that those are not for sale. I also do support efforts at universal background checks and closing certain loopholes, whether it's this gun show loophole or the so-called Charleston loophole that essentially allows somebody to walk out with a gun before a background check comes back, or the so-called boyfriend loophole that essentially allows people who have a domestic violence record to still be in possession of a firearm. We need to close those loopholes. And I do agree with folks that say we need to look at how can we ensure that we have up-to-date information on who owns these guns.
Mr. Secretary, aside from partnering with social media companies, do you see any other ways to better enable law enforcement to combat violence by white nationalists and white supremacists?
Oh, absolutely. As you know, this president cut funds from the very agency that's supposed to be out there working to investigate domestic terrorists, including white supremacists. And so I would restaff that agency. And I believe it's the Investigation and Analysis Office. We need to begin by restaffing that agency, restaffing the Community Partnerships Division, because I believe that their staff was, their funding was cut by 86% or something. So I would restaff to the Obama era levels, those two entities, and then go beyond that.
Is the current Attorney General Barr an enabler of white supremacy?
To the extent that the administration, that others in the administration do not take it seriously, that they've recommended and enacted these cuts to the ability of law enforcement to root out white supremacists and domestic terrorists, then I believe that they've been part of the problem.
Would you call Mr. Barr racist?
I follow the president and what he has said. I have not followed as closely some of the words of Barr, so I don't want to say that in this moment. But certainly the president, I do believe it.
Yeah, obviously you're running to win, but with regards to the entire slate and the candidates who are running as Democrats, it was told to me today by Matt Moretto from Latino Decisions that in this election cycle, whether it's picking the Democratic nominee or picking the president, that the number of Latino voters could equal or excel the number of black voters. And there's a lot of attention, of course, being given now to the importance of the black vote. Do you have a sense that the Democratic Party is doing what it needs to reach out to the Latino community, Latino voters? The last point is that Matt suggested that there still isn't enough on the ground kind of direct contact being made to turn out that vote,
Yeah.
even though they're there, they're physically there.
Well, I'm pleased with the plans that Chairman Bettis has announced, particularly in Florida, with voter education and with voter registration and turnout for the Latino community. I think that's something to build on. They've identified the challenge that we have, and I believe that they're on the right path. I think they need to stay on that path, and they need to add to it in a number of other states. But I do believe that Chairman Bettis understands the importance of the Latino vote, and is going to do more than we've done in the past to get at the Latino vote. Sure. I also believe that we have, just this very, very powerful coalition between African American and Latino voters that represents the future of our country, and we need to harness that. And in this campaign, I've tried to speak on issues that are at the intersection of that relationship. For instance, police brutality, right? Or Flint, or traveling to Puerto Rico as my first stop. Right? These issues that represent the intersection of a powerful coalition between the Black and Latino community that I believe, especially in states like Texas and others, can rewrite the electoral map in the years to come.
A quick follow-up, do you feel that most of the presidential candidates are as aware as you are and as aware as Mr. Bettis is of the ability to bring that vote out in this election cycle and what needs to be done?
I hope not, because I'm going to do it. No, I mean, let me answer seriously. I think some of them are, sure. I think there are some, like anything, I mean, some are better than others. Right? So I think there are some campaigns that clearly, yeah, I mean, I think, of course, there's some that are, and to their credit. And I hope that for everybody.
Let's go last question here.
All right.
So you spoke earlier about the contributions that the immigrant community has made to forward progress. Could you describe any plans you have to expand access to green jobs, to tech jobs? I mean, tech being one of the greatest wealth creators in communities and for people.
I didn't catch the question part of that.
Could you describe any plans that you have to expand access to green jobs or tech jobs, in addition to what you were talking about at the luncheon with free education, vocational schools, but specifically towards green jobs and tech?
But with regard to immigrants?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yeah, no, I mean, I think one of the things that we need to do, and in my immigration plan, I've laid out a lot of this, is we need to improve our legal immigration system, including harnessing the talent of people from around the world and giving people the opportunity who have studied in the United States to be able to stay in the United States and utilize their talents here instead of having to go back to their home country. Strategically increasing the number of H-1B visas and a number of other immigration opportunities. I've also called for 4.4 million family members of people who are already living in the United States to be able to more quickly become citizens themselves. And I think that when we talk about the talent that is out there of immigrants who are studying in our nation's universities, either in undergrad or graduate programs, and you think about green jobs or other tech jobs, I mean, that is a lot of the crowd that I think are going to become entrepreneurs and leaders in that industry, as well as down the line workers. So, when I think about immigrants and those jobs, that's what I think about.
Right. UBI?
Yeah, no, I support piloting UBI in the United States. We don't know whether that's something yet that is going to flourish in our country or in our system. How successful it would be, but I do believe, given the changing nature of our economy and the way that people are treated by employers, that it makes sense to pilot UBI in certain communities and see how that works in this country. Thanks a lot, guys.
Can you guarantee that you'll be on the March ballot in California, that you'll be an active candidate in March of this coming year?
Well, right now, I can't guarantee that I'm going to be in the September debate. But
That's the question.